Hej och välkomna tillbaka. Vi ska nu gå över till rymden. Vi har AAC Clyde Space och deras vd Luis Gomes via Zoom här. Hi and welcome.
Good morning.
Yeah. You can start your presentation.
So my presentation, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'd like to talk to you about AAC Clyde Space in general, but also in particular about giving you a summary of where we are with the last results. So we are a company that operates in the space industry. We build hardware, we provide services from satellites, we own our own satellites, and we operate in an industry that is growing very quickly. It is predicted that this industry will be worth more than $1 trillion by 2040, and we are seeing that growth path right now, and particularly in the last few years, we have seen a very strong growth in the sector. And this is being driven by the need for data and the appetite for data. The fact is, space data and space services underpin a lot of the activities that we do on Earth. We sometimes forget how important the data that we gather from satellites and from spacecraft is actually for our daily lives. And we're all familiar with things like weather forecasting and satellite navigation and satellite TV, but we tend to forget that actually space data underpins things such as farming, monitoring, helping our farmers to actually deliver better crops, better yields, or it allows us to track ships, to track assets all over the world. There is a variety of things that we do from space, and for that we need data. And because we need data, that data comes from satellites. And so the increasing need for data is driving the need for more satellites, more complex networks, more complex constellations of satellites. And so we have been growing with that sector. We are part of that industry. And we started by supplying subsystems and components for satellites, but over the years we have been building our own satellites. We've built our own constellations, and now we are actually delivering not only the hardware, but also the services and the data that people want and need. And so the group today has been built around exactly that. So we have a group of companies that include companies in 6 different companies in 5 different countries, 3 different continents. And what we are doing is actually building a set of companies, a vertically integrated group that can actually deliver not just hardware, but also the services and the data. So we have companies that specialize on components, building onboard computers, power systems, batteries, all those things you need to build satellites. They sell those to other companies, but we also use those on our own satellites that we build mostly in Glasgow and in Fairfax in the US. And we then integrate those components, those subsystems into one satellite. We test, we design, we test, we build. And then we organize the launch. And in some cases, we sell the satellites to some of our customers. So what we call turnkey missions come to us and we deliver you a satellite. In other cases, we keep the satellites. We actually will then control them. We'll exploit them. We will bring down the data that they produce, and we will sell that data to customers worldwide. And we have been growing quickly. So we are now about 170 staff. With 20 million in revenue, and we have approximately $40 million in backlog. And by building this group in the way we have actually built some unique capabilities. So, for instance, on weather and climate, through our acquisition of Omnisys in Sweden, we actually own one of the most important types of instrument for weather prediction. So microwave sounding technology is one of the pillars of what we do nowadays in terms of weather forecasting. And we own a company that's specialized in that. They've been developing those kind of instruments for many years. They have many years experience of building those. and they are probably one of the world-leading producers of microwave sounder instruments. And so they are part of our group. We control that IP, and we are working with the European Space Agency and OHB in Sweden to deliver the Arctic weather satellite constellation. And in the future, we are looking to build our own constellation based on this technology. And in the maritime and energy sector, we are working with Saab and Orbcom to develop the VDES. So this is the VHF data exchange service or system. This is the follow-on to the AIS system that we are already operating in space. And this will allow a revolution in the way we manage the seas and the traffic, vessel traffic around the world. So we'll be able to not only track ships, but we'll also be able to communicate back to them. We'll be also to send messages. And this will increase the safety at sea, and it will make our oceans much more safe, but also much more optimized. So we can now control ships. We can tell where to go, where they should go. We can start using autonomous navigation solutions. All of that will be enabled by these new solutions. And through our work with Saab and Orbcom, we are pioneering this new technology. And then, of course, there is our own technology. For many years, we have developed space technology. We have demonstrated it in space. We know it works. We have experience, and we have the track record of delivering solutions that work. And this is very important because it's fairly easy to launch a satellite into space, but it's very difficult to make sure that it actually works. And that requires experience, requires many years of experimenting, many years of actually gaining the experience of operating satellites in space. And we have that. So these are some of our unique capabilities. And with this in mind, we have been looking at how can we grow the company? What are the big growth sectors? What are the things that will drive our company forward? And we have identified that we can accelerate that growth through space data as a service, what we call SDAS. And this is when we basically build the satellites, we own the satellites, and then we just provide the data or the services to a customer. And this is, of course, not the only way we'll grow. Our hardware business continues to grow, but where we see a very large potential for growth is in the space data as a service. And with the technical skills and the experience we've got on the group, and the fact that we have our own designs, we are able to actually build our own spacecraft, design our own payloads, we are able to actually address that market very well. And so we identified 3 main markets where we are working already, and also where we have the capability to actually operate. So one is farming and forestry, the other is maritime and energy, and the other one is weather and climate. And as you might see, these are all connected to some extent. So weather is connected to both the maritime and energy sector and the farming and forestry. And of course, things like farming and forestry use ships to actually move around large quantities of their products. And what this means is that actually not only there are these 3 areas where we will be building satellites, or we are already building satellites to support these industries, but there is also then the opportunity to start interconnecting the data that we are producing, the data and the services we are producing. And this takes us on our growth path. So we have worked a plan from 2022 up to 2030, and this will see us increasingly doing more work on the space data as a service. It will become increasingly dominant in our business. And if you look at our backlog, you already see that a large part of it is already in the form of services and data that we are providing to customers. And this will see us starting to actually grow our constellation. Currently, we operate 4 satellites. We have another 18 in build right now for ourselves. So these are satellites that we will then launch over the next year or so. And what we will be doing this year and next year, and what these satellites will do is start to produce data that we will then provide to customers. And that's the beginning of our constellation. So what we are doing is growing a constellation of satellites to provide data and services to customers worldwide. And many of these customers are not traditional space users. So they would not, they need the data, but they would not usually be buying data from anyone. But the fact that we are enabling now them to access data easily without them having to buy satellites or without them having to commit to some of the operators that just want to sell them information rather than data. We are able to actually attract to this sector other users of data that traditionally have stayed away from the industry. Of course, to do this, we have been organizing our group. So we have expanded our management team last year, bringing in new talent, bringing in talent from outside the company and the group to actually strengthen our ability to address these new markets and our ability to actually manage our companies and deliver the products and services to our customers. And you'll see, for instance, on the right of this slide, Dr. Andrew Carroll, he's our president for data and services, and he's coming to actually brings the experience of many years delivering data from space to companies and organizations worldwide. And he has come to actually ensure that we have the capability to do that we have actually build that capability to deliver data and services to our customers. We have a very strong board. It comes from different areas. We're talking about people some with financial background, some with industry background. But the objective is to actually support and advise and generally help the management team in delivering our business plan. Just give you a summary. So in terms of net sales over the last few years, we have been increasing our net sales. We have been approaching a positive EBITDA. So the company has been growing consistently over the last few years. And that is seen on our earnings. For instance, our net sales increased 83% between the end of 2020 and 2021. And this shows that not only the market is growing, but we are actually being able to grow faster than that market. And this is very encouraging. Of course, in terms of what we look in terms of the different quarters, there are always variations. And there are always some factors in the market that actually might change, that might go up and down a little bit. What we see is we operate in a market that is very much at our projects are 1 year, 1 year and a half. It's very easy to actually move certain of the milestones. And that is seen on our quarterly results. And if you look at the quarterly results for Q1 this year, they were worse than what we would like. And that comes down to the fact that we are seeing quite a lot of industry-wide shortages. We have had issues with suppliers last year. And what that then does is impact our current work. If we couldn't produce certain components last year or certain subsystems last year because we did not have the parts, we then have to delay launches. And launches usually, although they are much more frequent these days than they used to be, what we see is that if we miss a launch in March, the next one is June or July. So because of that, what we have seen quite a lot of movement from on the last quarter. At the same time, we have been actually doing quite a lot of work internally on the organization to make it more efficient and to make it more responsive. And what this is doing is that actually there were some costs in the early part of this year. But our target remains to be EBITDA positive and operational cash flow positive this year. Our order backlog has grown quite a lot last year, continues to be strong. We continue to actually sell quite a lot of components and subsystems. So we see that our backlog has remained strong, and we find that very encouraging. So in terms of key takeaways, we are operating on a market, the market for small satellites, that is growing exponentially. This is being driven largely by the appetite and the need for data that the world sees. We are ideally placed to take advantage of that. We have the technology, we have the capability, we have the experience to actually grow into that market. We are developing a group, or we have developed a group, and we'll continue to develop that group of companies that have all all the necessary knowledge and the necessary abilities to actually address that growing market. And we have a clear path growth, a clear plan. So we are building our constellation. Said we already have 4 satellites. We have another 8 on the works, and we have plans to grow that constellation even further. And the objective is to actually be able to deliver the services and the data that people expect and need from space. And I see this as a great opportunity with things like climate change. We are seeing that our weather is changing, our climate is changing, our weather is more unpredictable. Our crops are not faring so well. So all of these things we can help to deliver an improvement to these. We can deliver the knowledge and the information people need to manage better these impacts of climate change. So we are on our way to become the world leader in data and services from space. And I would like you to join us in that journey. Thank you very much. I'll take questions now if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. I will take this in Swedish. Om ni har några frågor till Luis så får ni gärna skicka in detta via SMS. Thank you for presentation. Of course, we have a couple of follow-up questions. What kind of risks do you see when it comes to your forecast of reaching profitability this year?
Well, we of course expect, as I said, we still expect to be EBITDA positive this year. Yeah. There are some headwinds. We know that over the last year, or particularly over the last 3 months, we have seen the headwinds growing with the war in Ukraine. We have been solving the issues with suppliers, so that has actually been improving. But part shortages continue. And of course, the world economic situation is changing quite quickly. So there are always risks there. From our part, we don't expect that to have a major impact in our business, but there's always a risk.
Yeah, of course. I think supply chain is something you mentioned as well. How is that affecting your this present situation? I think it's on everybody's lips when it comes to bottlenecks and so on, cost inflations.
So we have seen that actually now for almost 2 years, starting. It didn't affect us much until last year. It didn't affect us directly until last year. We had some suppliers, that supply us assemblies and subsystems that were late. So that was the problem we have. But what we have seen since then is actually an issue with getting secure dates for delivery of components. And that is now affecting us, like affects the rest of the industry. And the main problem is that it's very difficult to plan forward when you can deliver products to your customer, because your supplier of integrated circuits cannot guarantee to you when they will supply those. And that's the risk. It's not so much that it's not available, it's that you don't know if it's going to be available next month or in 3 months' time. If you are trying to plan forward, that can be quite challenging. Of course, we have taken measures to reduce the impact. We are looking at alternatives. We are changing designs. So we are moving, in some cases, to parts and components that are more widely available. But it's always a challenge, yes.
Yeah, of course. But it sounds like you're managing it, and your customers are used to this disturbance, right, at the moment? Or...
Yes, unfortunately, it's industry-wide, so everyone is seeing that right now.
Yeah, I think you have an impressive backlog, which you mentioned. What's the time for you to deliver on that backlog?
It's a mixture. So we've got some of that backlog is in 6 months. Some is in 1 year. Other is longer, actually. Okay. So it's a mixture, and you'd see probably more or less equally distributed through time, that backlog. So the short term, medium term, and long term.
Yeah, okay. You can't say anything concrete or no.
Well, I usually that is a forecast that we usually don't give in detail. But it's also a mixture. It's also quite dynamic. So it depends very much if we are getting components, and subsystems are usually at about 6 months, 6 months to a year delivery. If we are talking about satellites, you are talking 1 year to 2 years delivery. If we are talking space data as a service, you're talking several years delivery down the line. So it's very dynamic.
Yeah. Thanks. We move over to your strategy. You mentioned that you're looking for bolt-on acquisitions. What kind of companies are you looking at?
As always, if there is a good company that brings in some capability to the company that we don't have, we are very interested in hearing from those companies. But if I had to get on my crystal ball and look into the future, what we would be looking for is more companies in the downstream, so in the data and in the information. And in the data can be data management or can be extraction of information from data. So those are more the companies we would be looking for now. But as I say, if there is a good company, we're always interested.
Yeah, but it's on the ground, right? So you're looking for a company, and you don't want to widen your service offering. If I understand you correctly, you want to increase the service offering, but not like an entirely new vertical is not on the table, right? No.
No. So we have identified 3 verticals that we see as growing, but also we see as actually something that we can address, a market that we can address because we already have some capabilities in that market. And this might be the technology, so we might have some unique technology, like in the case of weather, or we might already have a first mover advantage, like in the case of VVS. So we are identifying those technologies and identifying those markets, and because of that, we want to develop those verticals. Of course, the future is the future and might change. But right now, again, going back to my crystal ball, I would be looking at where we will be going is in these 3 verticals. So farming and forestry, maritime and energy in this context is maritime domain, so it's things like offshore wind farms, and weather and climate. So those are the 3 areas that we are specializing our service offering.
Yeah, I understand. Is it a fragmented market, or how is the market for that kind of?
It's actually, there are 3 different verticals. So in the case of forestry and farming, this is a very well established. From space is a very well established market. I've been personally working on this one since the early 2000s. So it's a very well established market. It's a very large market. It's forecast to be worth about $1 billion a year in a few years' time. Some people say it's probably going to be worth even more than that, 4 times that. But it is a market that is very competitive. We have some technology capabilities there, and that's why we entered that market. We are able to deliver into certain areas, into certain parts of that market. The case of the maritime domain, it's not very fragmented. There are very few companies actually working on it right now. We believe we've got an advantage over them, and that's why we are pursuing that. And in the case of weather and climate, that's a new market. It's traditionally done by governments, but governments have been changing their mind, and they are now starting to actually acquire data, buy data from private companies. We have the first contracts in the US awarded to private companies about 3 years ago. We had the first contract this year already in Europe. So it is changing. Again, our technology is quite more advanced than what our competitors are doing at this stage, and because of that, we can actually take advantage of that change in the market.
Yeah, I think when it comes to geopolitical tensions, and I think we have some bad news starting this year with high inflation, recession worries, and also the war. How has that affected your clients, or their willingness to invest in your kind of products?
So far, we haven't seen a change from our clients. Space projects usually are longer term. They're talking usually about long term. They are a long-term thing, so people usually are invested for the long term, and so you don't see an immediate effect from things that might, we all hope, that might be transient and fairly short in time duration. So, of course, if things continue for long periods, then things change. But so far, we haven't seen a big impact from that. And actually, some of the stresses that the current situation is causing will probably require more data from space. So, for instance, with the increasing prices in food production and the difficulty in actually producing food, our ability to monitor and to do precision agriculture has never been so important. So what we are doing now, what we are seeing now, is an increase, is a move from farmers saying, okay, I need to improve the way I do my farming. I need to use less pesticides, less fertilizer, less water, because all of those things have become very expensive. So we can help with that. Actually, our products for farming farming and forestry are about reducing the use of those kind of things. So pesticides, fertilizers, all of which are extremely expensive. So we can actually help that. We can help with improving things.
Yeah, I understand. Efficiency. Thank you very much, Luis, for your presentation. Vi kommer ta en paus här.